All right, let's journey back in time to ancient China. Today we're going to untangle this epic tale of Chinese dynasties.
Yeah.
We're basing this deep dive on this fascinating audio documentary. Whether you're a history buff or just kind of curious, I think is going to be pretty captivating.
Yeah, it's amazing how these empires rose and fell and how they ultimately shaped a civilization, like over millennia.
Hmm.
And it all starts, believe it or not, with a flood.
A flood, you've got my attention now. Flood stories always seem to mark, some kind of turning point, right?
Exactly. Around 2070 BCE, China's plains were just devastated, ravaged by these terrible floods. But then this skilled engineer, Yu the Great, really stepped up. But he didn't just, try to control the water. I mean, he actually designed this whole system of canals and irrigation.
So he tamed the floods and also used that water for agriculture.
Exactly. It was like turning a disaster into an opportunity. And of course, that earned him the title, Yu the Great, and he became the first emperor establishing the Xia dynasty.
So basically a superhero engineer who became emperor. I mean, it makes sense. Solving a crisis like that would make anyone a legend, right? But dynasties, I mean, they become all about family lineage. Like, how did that happen, that shift?
It's really interesting because Yu actually believed in meritocracy. He wanted his minister of justice to succeed him.
Makes sense.
Yeah, but after Yu died, this tribal leader kind of just took over, and that led to a revolt. The people were so loyal to Yu that they insisted his son, Qi, become the next ruler, and that's how hereditary rule began in China.
Wow. So one flood, one brilliant engineer, and boom, a sudden power shift and dynasties are born.
Yeah,
It's a pretty epic origin story for sure.
it is.
But we don't have much written history, from the Xia dynasty, right? Like, how much do we actually know about them?
That's the challenge. We do have some archaeological evidence, pointing to some pretty advanced agricultural practices, like their use of stone tools, for example.
Right.
And they also developed the lunar calendar, which is still in use today. But the Xia dynasty is still kind of shrouded in mystery because of the lack of written records. And, that makes the next dynasty, the Shang, even more important.
The Shang dynasty. Now, this is where things get a little clear, right? We finally have some written records. We've got this amazing bronze work. It's like we're stepping into, a more concrete era.
Exactly. The Shang dynasty, starting around 1600 BCE, is considered the first one with confirmed written history. And these aren't, your typical royal decrees. We're talking oracle bone inscriptions.
Okay, you got to break that down for me. Oracle bones.
Yeah.
How do bones give us a glimpse into their history?
Okay, so imagine needing some guidance on like a really important decision. You would consult with a priest who would carve your question onto an animal bone or turtle shell,
Okay.
and then they would heat it up, and the cracks that would form from that heat, they would interpret those as the answer from the gods.
So, like a mystical fortune cookie, almost.
Yeah.
But how do we know what the cracks mean? Can we even read those inscriptions?
That's the amazing part. We can actually decipher them today. They actually reveal this like complex writing system, and they were actually the precursors to modern Chinese characters.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it really is. And by studying those bones, we've learned about everything from their agriculture to their weather patterns to rituals, even like royal family gossip and drama.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, and get this, they used seashells as currency.
Seashells as currency. I never learned that in history class.
Ah.
What else made the Shang dynasty unique? What was their society like?
They were very much a Bronze Age civilization, but bronze, it wasn't just for their weapons. We find these like intricate bronze vessels and decorations, all showing a pretty high level of craftsmanship. They also had this feudal system where the king, granted land to nobles in exchange for their loyalty and military service.
The classic power pyramid. And those at the top, they probably lived pretty extravagantly, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The Shang dynasty is known for these super extravagant burials. We're talking tombs filled with bronze, jade, chariots, these really precious artifacts. And in some cases, they actually practiced human sacrifice, burying servants and concubines alongside their rulers.
That's intense. That definitely highlights the immense power of the king and their beliefs about the afterlife. But if they had this advanced civilization, what led to their downfall?
Ironically, that feudal system that brought them stability also ended up leading to their downfall.
How so?
Well, as the nobles got more and more powerful, they became more independent, and eventually this powerful vassal state, the Zhou, they challenged the Shang and ended up overtaking them.
So enter the Zhou dynasty, which lasted almost 8 centuries.
The longest lasting one in Chinese history.
Incredible. They must have had a winning formula.
They did. The Zhou dynasty, starting around 1046 BCE, saw a tremendous change. We see major advancements in irrigation systems, horseback riding, and crucially, the mastery of iron.
Iron. It changes everything, right? Why was iron so important compared to bronze?
Iron is a lot stronger, more durable, and it was more abundant than bronze. So that allowed the Zhou to make much better weapons and tools, which in turn fueled their expansion and economic growth. It really shows how technology can literally reshape history.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So they were conquering new territories, making technological leaps. But the Zhou dynasty is also known for its philosophical revolution, isn't it? The 100 schools of thought come to mind.
Ah, yes. This is where it gets really exciting. So imagine this period of just like intense intellectual debate and these philosophers challenging every notion about government, morality, even the very nature of reality. It was ancient China's version of like the Enlightenment, and it laid the groundwork for some of the most influential philosophies in history.
Okay, give me the highlight reel. Who are the big names and what were their core ideas?
We can't talk about Chinese philosophy without talking about Confucius. His teachings really emphasized respect for elders, social harmony, education, and, moral leadership. The idea that, like, a well-ordered society starts with individuals cultivating virtue.
Confucius, the ultimate source of wisdom, right? And his own life story is pretty fascinating. Wasn't he born into poverty and, faced a lot of hardships?
He was, yeah. He was born into a very poor family, and Confucius devoted his life to learning and teaching. The death of his mother, when he was around 40, really had a deep impact on him.
Makes sense.
He actually mourned her for 3 years, and this experience really shaped his views on filial piety and the importance of family.
It's amazing how personal experiences can, shape entire philosophical systems, right? So Confucianism, emphasizes harmony and virtue. But wasn't there a school of thought that took a completely different approach?
Oh, there was. While Confucianism focused on this, inherent goodness in humanity, legalism took a much more pessimistic view.
Okay.
Legalists believed that humans were inherently selfish and required, like, strict laws and punishments to maintain order.
That's quite a contrast. It's like a tough love approach to governance, I guess.
Yeah.
What other major schools of thought emerged during this time?
Well, there's Taoism. Founded by Laozi, it offered a completely different perspective.
Right.
Taoists really emphasize living in harmony with nature, going with the flow, accepting that natural order of the universe, kind of embodying that concept of yin and yang.
And Taoism, that ancient art of, finding balance and embracing the Tao.
Yeah.
It's a philosophy that still resonates with people today. So these three schools of thought were like shaping the intellectual landscape, during the Zhou dynasty.
Yeah.
But if the Zhou dynasty was so successful, how did it ultimately collapse?
Remember that feudal system that helped them rise to power. That eventually became their undoing. The regional lords, they just got stronger and stronger, and they started challenging the Zhou king's authority. And that, of course, led to this period of fragmentation and conflict that we call the Warring States period.
Warring States period. It sounds like a real-life Game of Thrones, right? All these different factions battling for supremacy.
Right.
What was it like during that time?
Well, it was a really chaotic time with 7 major states basically emerging from that fragmented Zhou dynasty, and they were each vying for dominance. It was during this period that, that Sun Tzu wrote his famous work, The Art of War.
Sun Tzu, the master strategist.
Exactly. It's a treatise on military strategy that's still studied today.
Absolutely. What were some of the key events of the Warring States period, and how did it ultimately, end?
The Warring States period was really just constant warfare, shifting alliances, these ambitious rulers seeking to expand their territory. And out of all this chaos, one state emerged as the most powerful, and that was the Qin. And their leader, Ying Zheng, was a force to be reckoned with.
Ying Zheng, the man who would become Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor.
Yeah.
His name is synonymous with the unification of China, but I imagine his path to power was probably pretty tumultuous.
You're absolutely right. Ying Zheng was he was ruthless and ambitious, a brilliant strategist. And the Qin state, they had embraced iron weaponry really early on, and they weren't afraid to use it. He faced tons of challenges and even survived a few assassination attempts on his life.
Assassination attempts, that definitely suggests he was, a controversial figure. Can you tell me more about these attempts on his life? Did they affect, his leadership?
One pretty dramatic story involves a poisoned dagger that was concealed within a map.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So Yingzheng is meeting with this supposed defector who's offering, like, information about a rival state, but of course it was a trap. The assassin lunged at him, but Yingzheng managed to dodge the attack. That led to this, like, crazy fight that he ended up winning.
It sounds like a scene out of a movie. I mean, you have to wonder how those kinds of threats really shaped his mindset and his reign. So he survived those assassination attempts, conquered his rivals. He was definitely on a trajectory toward greatness.
He was. And in 221 BCE, Yingzheng finally achieved the seemingly impossible. He unified all of China, finally ending the Warring States period. He then declared himself Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor, a title reflecting his ambition to create a dynasty that would last, get this, for 10,000 generations.
10,000 generations. That's quite the goal. So he unified China, took on the mantle of emperor. What were his next steps? How did he go about shaping this newly unified China?
Well, Qin Shi Huang, he was known for his sweeping reforms. He wasn't just content with conquering. He wanted to, like, fundamentally reshape Chinese society. Yeah. He wanted to create this unified, centralized empire that would break with the past and establish a new era.
What kind of changes did he actually implement to make that happen? Like, what were the hallmarks of his rule?
He standardized everything, weights, measures, even the writing system.
Wow.
Yeah, and this really fostered, a sense of shared identity across this vast, newly unified empire. He also abolished the feudal system, which had really weakened previous dynasties, and replaced it with a centralized bureaucracy, with officials appointed by him.
So it sounds like he was laying the groundwork for a more modern, unified China. But what about his governing style? Was he a benevolent leader, or was he more of a tyrant?
That's where things get, complicated. Qin Shi Huang, he was a firm believer in legalism. He really viewed harsh laws and punishments as the key to maintaining order and preventing rebellions.
That doesn't sound very pleasant for those under his rule. What kind of punishments are we talking about here?
We're talking about collective punishment, where entire families could be held accountable for the actions of, like, one member. We're also talking about forced labor on a massive scale, with tens of thousands of people conscripted to build grand public works projects, including the precursor to the Great Wall of China.
The Great Wall. So the beginnings of that iconic structure date back to the Qin Dynasty. It's amazing how something built so long ago can still stand as a symbol of, China's strength and resilience.
It really is. Now, while the Great Wall that we see today is mostly from the Ming Dynasty, Qin Shi Huang, he initiated the project, connecting these existing fortifications to create a barrier against nomadic invaders from the north.
So he was unifying China, building these monumental structures, and he was ruling with an iron fist, it seems. But he wasn't exactly known for his humility, right? Didn't he become obsessed with the idea of immortality?
That's right. As he got older, Qin Shi Huang, he became terrified of death. He sent these expeditions across the seas trying to find these mythical islands that were believed to hold, like, the elixir of immortality. And he even ingested potions created by his alchemists, which, ironically, may have contributed to his death.
Trying to cheat death and accidentally poisoning himself in the process. The irony is, like, almost Shakespearean. But there's one more thing that really cements Qin Shi Huang's place in history, right? The Terracotta Army.
Ah, yes. The Terracotta Army. It's one of the most incredible archaeological discoveries ever. Just picture this vast underground necropolis filled with thousands of life-size terracotta warriors, each one totally unique, each one armed. And they were meant to protect Qin Shi Huang in the afterlife.
It's just mind-boggling. This massive hidden army discovered, like, accidentally by farmers in the 1970s.
Yeah.
It's an incredible testament to his power and his beliefs.
Absolutely. It speaks volumes about Qin Shi Huang's ambition, his power, his belief in the afterlife. Even in death, he wanted to rule supreme.
This emperor, this unifier, this tyrant, he left a legacy that's both awe-inspiring and terrifying. But despite all his efforts, his dynasty didn't actually last very long, did it?
No, it didn't. The Qin dynasty, for all of its achievements, was very short-lived.
Okay.
While Qin Shi Huang's harsh rule and oppressive policies created a lot of resentment, and after his death, these rebellions just erupted everywhere, which ultimately led to the dynasty's collapse in 206 BCE.
And from those ashes, a new dynasty rises, the Han Dynasty. And this one's a game changer, right? It's the dynasty that gives its name to the majority of Chinese people today.
It is. The Han Dynasty, which spanned over 4 centuries, is considered like a golden age in Chinese history. It was this era of peace, prosperity, and cultural flourishing. And it all started with a peasant who overthrew the Qin, Liu Bang, who became Emperor Gaozu of Han.
A peasant emperor. Now, that's the story I want to hear more about. How did someone go from commoner to emperor? That's quite a leap.
It is. Liu Bang was a kind of a minor official who rose to prominence during that, all the chaos following Qin Shi Huang's death. He was a really skilled military leader, and he was this charismatic figure that could really rally people to his cause. And in a kind of a dramatic turn of events, he defeated the Qin forces and established the Han Dynasty.
So military skills, charisma, and a little bit of luck maybe. But how did he rule? Was he another tyrant like Qin Shi Huang?
Not at all. Gao Zu was a really shrewd politician. He understood that he needed to win the support of the people, so he reduced taxes, he freed slaves, and he promoted Confucianism, which, emphasized social harmony and moral leadership. A big contrast from the Qin dynasty's legalism.
Yeah, it seems like he learned from the mistakes of his predecessors, right? He understood that a stable empire required more than just force. And he also established a system that would really influence Chinese governance for centuries. The civil service.
That's right. The Han Dynasty implemented a civil service system that was based on merit and examinations. This meant officials were chosen based on their knowledge and their abilities, not just, family connections. A huge change from how things were done in the past.
It's a massive shift. It created a system where, in theory, anyone could rise through the ranks based on, their own merit. So things were looking pretty good for the Han Dynasty. But what about those nomadic tribes that always seemed to be a problem for the previous dynasties? Did the Han have to deal with them as well?
They did, the Shanyu, a very powerful confederation of nomadic tribes. They were a constant threat to the Han Dynasty's northern borders. There were periods of war, periods of uneasy peace. There was even a time when, the Han Emperor actually agreed to pay tribute to the Shanyu to try to avoid conflict.
Wow, paying tribute to avoid war. That must have been a tough decision for a powerful emperor. But sometimes peace is more valuable than pride, right?
Yeah.
So we have this era of stability, cultural flourishing. But I'm guessing there's also some palace intrigue mixed in there. There always seems to be some drama unfolding behind the scenes.
Oh, there's always palace intrigue. One particularly dramatic story involves Empress Liu, Gaozu's widow. She was a pretty ruthless figure. She really consolidated her power after her husband's death. She even went so far as to eliminate potential rivals within the royal family.
Ruthless is putting it mildly. Are there any specific examples of her, let's just say, persuasive methods?
Well, one really tragic story involves Lady Qi, one of Gaozu's favored concubines. Empress Liu had her mutilated. Her limbs were cut off, her eyes gouged out, and then she was thrown into a latrine.
Oh, that's just horrific. It's a reminder that power can corrupt,
Yeah.
even in a seemingly golden age.
It really is. But even with these, internal struggles, the Han Dynasty continued to thrive. One of its most famous emperors, Emperor Wu, who ruled for over 50 years, expanded the empire. He battled the Xiongnu, and he also established trade routes that would eventually become known as the Silk Road.
The Silk Road, another just iconic element of Chinese history. It really connected China to the West, bringing goods, ideas, even religions like Buddhism into China. It was more than just a trade route. It was like a conduit for this huge cultural exchange.
Absolutely. The Silk Road was a major achievement of the Han Dynasty, and it had a lasting impact on Chinese culture and global trade, really shaping, interactions between East and West for centuries.
So this golden age, expansion, cultural exchange. But even great dynasties experience decline, right? What factors led to the downfall of the Han Dynasty?
There were several factors. There was internal strife, economic woes, and of course the pressure from those nomadic tribes we talked about earlier. In 9 AD, this really powerful official, Wang Mang, usurped the throne and actually established the very short-lived Qin dynasty.
Wang Mang. He's a pretty interesting figure. Wasn't he trying to implement some really radical reform?
He was. Wang Mang is sometimes referred to as China's, socialist emperor.
Wow.
Yeah. He attempted to redistribute land, limit private property, and control prices. His intentions might have been good, but his reforms ended up being way too disruptive, and they just led to widespread chaos and rebellion.
Another example of, well-intentioned reforms kind of backfiring.
Yeah.
It highlights how even the best intentions can have these, really unforeseen consequences.
Mm-hmm.
But the Han Dynasty, it wasn't completely over, right? Didn't it split into two periods?
You're exactly right. After Wang Mang's Jin dynasty was overthrown, the Han dynasty was restored, but, it was a shadow of its former self. And it split into two periods, the Western Han and the Eastern Han.
So the Han Dynasty was clinging to power, but things were definitely becoming more and more unstable. This must set the stage for even more turmoil in the centuries to come, right?
Oh, absolutely. The fall of the Han Dynasty in 220 CE marked the beginning of a period of, fragmentation and conflict known as the Three Kingdoms period. It's a time of, shifting alliances, epic battles, and legendary figures that have really captivated the Chinese people for generations.
So last time we left off with the Han Dynasty kind of fading from view and China entering this Three Kingdoms period, it's a familiar pattern, right? Like one era ends, another begins, and out of the ashes, these new power dynamics, they emerge. And what's really interesting about the Three Kingdoms period is that it's more than just, political maneuvering. It's this era of larger-than-life heroes, captivating legends, and just epic stories that have resonated, like, throughout Chinese history.
Yeah, you could almost think of it as China's version of, like, the Trojan War. Just full of strategic brilliance and bravery, but also betrayals. It's a period that has, like, really captivated storytellers and historians for centuries.
So we've got these three kingdoms, right? Wei, Wu, and Shuhan, each vying for control. What were these kingdoms actually like? Like, what were their strengths, weaknesses, and how did their struggle for power actually play out?
Well, each kingdom had its own distinct character, you could say. The Wei, founded by the very ambitious Cao Cao, they were known for their military strength. The Wu, led by Sun Quan, they were more of a naval power, dominating the southeast. And then you had the Shu Han, established by Liu Bei, who claimed legitimacy as the successor to the Han Dynasty, kind of invoking that sense of continuity.
So each kingdom had its own claim to power, its own strategy for winning. What were some of the key figures and the turning points during this era? It sounds like a period just filled with drama and intrigue.
Oh, the Three Kingdoms period is just overflowing with, compelling figures and strategic battles. There's Zhuge Liang. He was this brilliant strategist and advisor to Liu Bei. He was known for his cunning tactics. He even invented the repeating crossbow.
Wow.
Yeah, and then you have Guan Yu. He was a loyal general, a sworn brother of Liu Bei. He became like this revered figure in Chinese culture. He's often depicted as, a red-faced warrior with this long flowing beard, which symbolizes loyalty and righteousness.
It's amazing how some of these figures have transcended history and become almost mythical. They're more than just like historical figures, right? They become cultural icons representing, some pretty powerful values, but who eventually triumphed in this whole struggle for power. How did the Three Kingdoms era finally come to an end?
The Wei, with their military might, they eventually proved to be the strongest. They conquered the Shu Han first, but then, in a twist of fate, they were overthrown by a powerful clan, the Sima clan, who established the Jin Dynasty, finally unifying China again in 280 CE. It's a reminder that power is always changing, and even the victors can become the vanquished.
The Jin Dynasty.
Huh.
It's fascinating how this cycle just repeats itself throughout Chinese history. These periods of unity followed by fragmentation and then reunification under a new dynasty. Were the Jin able to hold on to power, or did they kind of succumb to the same forces that brought down their predecessors?
Unfortunately, the Jin Dynasty, they couldn't escape those patterns of the past. Their first emperor, Emperor Wu, well, he was more interested in shall we say, personal indulgences than effective governance. He's infamous for his rather unusual method of choosing concubines.
Okay, a harem already suggests a certain level of indulgence. What did this emperor do that was so out of the ordinary?
Well, Emperor Wu would he'd ride around in a goat-drawn cart, and wherever the goat stopped, he would have relations with the woman whose quarters happened to be in front of him at that moment.
A goat-drawn cart. That's a new one. Talk about leaving matters of the heart to chance, or in this case, to a goat. But seriously, that doesn't exactly scream strong and decisive leader, does it?
It doesn't. And after Emperor Wu died, the Jin Dynasty descended into civil war. You had all these different factions vying for power, and that instability really weakened the empire, which allowed nomadic tribes, who had always been kind of a threat, to invade and conquer those northern regions.
So China was divided once again, and those nomadic tribes saw the opportunity, and they seized it. They expanded their influence. How long did this period of fragmentation last? Was it as chaotic and violent as, like, the Warring States period?
It was a pretty long and tumultuous period, marked by the rise and fall of various short-lived dynasties and kingdoms. It was a time of real political instability, but it was also a time of cultural exchange and regional innovation, as different areas developed their own identities. It wasn't until 581 CE that a new dynasty came along and reunified China. the Sui
Sui
dynasty.
Dynasty. They're often seen as like a bridge between that chaos and a new golden age. What were their key accomplishments?
That's a great way to put it. The Sui dynasty, they were relatively short-lived, lasting only about 37 years. But they accomplished a lot in that time. They reasserted Han Chinese rule, they initiated efforts to integrate the various nomadic groups that had settled in China, and they also launched massive public works projects, including reconstructing the Grand Canal. And of course, they laid the groundwork for one of the most glorious periods in Chinese history, the Tang dynasty.
Grand Canal. It's one of those engineering feats that's like even today it's hard to grasp this vast network of waterways connecting North and South China. It's still functioning today, right?
It is. The Grand Canal was and continues to be essential for trade, transportation, and communication. It's a real testament to the Sui dynasty's ambition and their vision for a unified China. It connected all these different regions and, facilitated the flow of goods and ideas.
So the Sui dynasty really sets the stage, and then comes the Tang dynasty, considered one of the most remarkable periods in Chinese history.
Yeah.
Their empire just stretched from the Pacific to Central Asia. It was an era of art, literature, innovation. What were the key ingredients that made the Tang so successful?
The Tang Dynasty, which lasted from 618 to 907 CE, it was a time of just extraordinary achievement. Their success was really due to several factors: strong leadership, a stable government, a thriving economy, and this really dynamic culture that embraced diversity and innovation.
Okay, let's break that down a bit.
Yeah.
It all starts with strong leadership, right?
Yeah.
Tell me about the emperors who shaped the Tang dynasty. Were there any standout figures that really left their mark?
Well, one of the most pivotal figures was Emperor Taizong, who ruled from 626 to 649. He was a brilliant military strategist, a very skilled administrator, and he's also he's recognized as a great patron of the arts. He's considered one of the most effective and influential emperors in Chinese history.
He sounds like a triple threat: brains, brawn, and artistic sensibility.
Yeah.
But I heard his rise to power was kind of complicated. Something about a rivalry with his brothers, right?
That's right. The story of Taizong's rise to power is full of drama and intrigue. There was this power struggle with his brothers, and it culminated in the Rizwanwu Gate incident. Basically, Taizong's forces they ambushed and killed his rivals, which secured his claim to the throne. It's a story that's been told and retold, highlighting that, often ruthless nature of power struggles within families.
It's like a scene straight out of Shakespeare, right?
Yeah.
But once he was in power, it sounds like he actually proved to be a pretty wise and capable ruler.
He did. Taizong's reign was characterized by peace, prosperity, and expansion. He subdued the Turks, who had been, a constant threat to China's northern borders. He extended the empire's influence into Central Asia, and he also cultivated this vibrant culture of learning and innovation. Even today, he's still considered a model ruler in Chinese history.
He sounds like a pretty amazing leader. He was building an empire, promoting the arts and sciences. It really does sound like a golden age. What were some of the major cultural and technological advancements that happened during the Tang Dynasty? What innovations came out of this period of flourishing?
Well, the Tang Dynasty is really renowned for its beautiful poetry, its exquisite ceramics, and also advancements in printing, which really helped to spread knowledge and literacy. We also see the development of gunpowder during this period, a discovery that would, of course, have this revolutionary impact on warfare around the world.
Gunpowder. That's a game changer for sure.
Yeah.
It's amazing to think that something that would transform warfare around the world had its roots in Tang Dynasty China. It really makes you think about all the unforeseen ripple effects of these ancient discoveries. But even golden ages, they eventually come to an end, right? What led to the decline of the Tang Dynasty? What forces chipped away at their power and influence?
Sadly, like many dynasties before it, the Tang Dynasty eventually faced internal strife and external pressures that led to its decline. One of the pivotal moments was the An Lushan Rebellion. It was this devastating civil war that ravaged the empire from 755 to 763.
The An Lushan Rebellion. I've heard the name, but I don't really know much about it. What caused this rebellion? What were its lasting consequences?
The rebellion was led by An Lushan, a powerful general who had gained the favor of the emperor, but ultimately turned against him. The rebellion was incredibly destructive, causing just widespread death, famine. economic devastation. It really weakened the Tang dynasty and, ultimately contributed to its downfall.
It's a reminder that that even the most powerful empires can be brought down by, by conflicts from within. It's this like this pattern that you see throughout history.
Mhm.
These internal divisions create these opportunities for instability and decline. So after the Tang dynasty fell, China entered another period of fragmentation, right?
Yeah, exactly. The fall of the Tang dynasty in 907 marked the beginning of the Five Dynasties and Ten Kingdoms period. It was a very chaotic era of political division and warfare that lasted for over half a century.
Five dynasties and 10 kingdoms. Okay, it's a lot to keep track of. It sounds like a period of, you know, extreme complexity and upheaval.
Hmm.
What were the defining characteristics of this period, and how did it finally come to an end? Was there another like unifying force that emerged?
The Five Dynasties and Ten Kingdoms period is it's notoriously complex and confusing, even for historians. It was a time when, various warlords and these short-lived dynasties just fought for control, creating this constantly shifting landscape of power. It was a time of instability, but it was also a time of cultural exchange and regional innovation. Different areas kind of developed their own unique identities and traditions.
So it was like this patchwork quilt of competing powers, each with its own, ambitions and strategies for survival. But someone eventually had to come along and stitch that quilt back together, right?
Right.
Who rose to the challenge and reunified China after all this fragmentation.
It was the Song dynasty, established in 960 CE by Zhou Guangyin, a military leader who seized power and inaugurated a dynasty that would rule for over 3 centuries.
The Song Dynasty, they're renowned for their cultural achievements, aren't they? I remember learning about, innovations like printing and gunpowder and the compass. So much progress came out of this period. What were the key factors that allowed the Song Dynasty to achieve such like remarkable advancements?
The Song dynasty, despite facing military challenges from nomadic tribes in the north, experienced a golden age of Chinese culture and technology. They made significant strides in printing, shipbuilding, and gunpowder weaponry. They also developed this really sophisticated economic system with a really vibrant market and the world's first use of paper money.
Paper money. That's such a fundamental part of our lives today.
Yeah.
That it's easy to forget how revolutionary it was at the time. Can you imagine like the impact it had on trade and daily life? The Song Dynasty, they might not have been the most dominant militarily, but their innovations had this like global reach that we still feel today. But if they were making such progress in other areas, why were they facing like constant military threats from the north? What was the source of that conflict?
Despite those advancements, the Song dynasty faced persistent challenges from these powerful nomadic groups to the north. This included the Khitans, who established the Liao dynasty, and later the Jurchens, who founded the Jin dynasty. These conflicts were this like constant drain on the Song's resources, and they ultimately contributed to their eventual decline.
So they were trying to hold their own against these really formidable nomadic groups, and then a new force arrives on the scene, a force that would completely change the course of Chinese history. The Mongols. We're talking Genghis Khan here, one of the most like famous conquerors in human history. His arrival really marks this dramatic turning point, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Genghis Khan, he was this like transformative figure. He unified all the Mongol tribes, forged them into this formidable fighting force, and he set his sights on conquering not just China but vast parts of Asia and Europe. His ambition and his military prowess were unmatched.
Genghis Khan. I mean, the name just evokes these images of, fierce warriors sweeping conquests and let's be honest, a certain degree of brutality.
Yeah.
What were the key factors that made him such a successful conqueror? What strategies and tactics did he use to achieve that kind of dominance?
Well, Genghis Khan, he was a brilliant military strategist, and he was also this, very charismatic leader who really inspired unwavering loyalty in his followers. He's also a pragmatist, though, willing to use, some pretty ruthless tactics to get what he wanted. His armies were known for their speed, their discipline, and their mastery of horseback warfare. They were a force unlike anything the world had seen before.
They were like a storm sweeping across the steppes, leaving this trail of conquered kingdoms in their wake. But Genghis Khan didn't actually conquer all of China himself, did he? Did he ever achieve that that ultimate goal of bringing all of China under Mongol rule?
He didn't conquer all of China himself. He died in 1227, but his legacy, his ambition, it lived on through his successors. It was actually his grandson, Kublai Khan, who finally conquered the Song dynasty in 1279 and established the Yuan dynasty, the first foreign dynasty to rule all of China.
The Yuan dynasty, the Mongol Empire. I mean, at its peak, it stretched from the Pacific Ocean to Eastern Europe.
Yeah.
One of the largest empires the world had ever seen. It's mind-boggling to imagine the vastness and the diversity of that empire. What was life like in China under under Mongol rule? How did the Mongols interact with the existing Chinese population and their culture?
Mongol rule in China, it was a complex period. It was characterized by both cultural exchange, but also oppression. The Mongols, they introduced new ideas and technologies and trade goods to China. But they also imposed this really rigid social hierarchy that, placed the Mongols at the top and subjected the native Chinese population to discrimination and second-class status. It was this time of innovation, but also tension as different cultures clashed and interacted.
So it was kind of a mixed bag. Some positive developments, but also, a good deal of resentment towards these foreign rulers. It's a scenario that we've seen play out, countless times throughout history.
Yeah.
The challenges, the complexities of empires trying to rule over these diverse populations. And eventually, like all dynasties before it, the Yuan dynasty, it began to decline.
It did. Internal strife, corruption, economic difficulties, and rebellions, all of that weakened the Yuan dynasty's hold on power. And in 1368, this peasant rebellion, led by Zhou Yuanzhang, they overthrew the Mongols and established the Ming Dynasty.
The Ming Dynasty, another shift in power, another new chapter in this ongoing saga of Chinese history. And if I remember correctly, the Ming Dynasty was really all about restoring Han Chinese rule and culture after a century of Mongol dominance. What were some of their key accomplishments? What steps did they take to reassert those Chinese traditions and values?
The Ming Dynasty, which spanned from 1368 to 1644, is really known for its efforts to revitalize those traditional Chinese culture and values after that century of Mongol rule. They reinstated Confucianism as the state ideology. They rebuilt the bureaucracy, and they embarked on some pretty ambitious public works projects, including the extensive restoration and expansion of the Great Wall.
The Great Wall. Now we're talking about the iconic structure that we see today, right? Those formidable fortifications winding across those mountains. A testament to Chinese ingenuity, determination, and the desire to protect their borders. It's an image that's recognized around the world as a symbol of China's enduring strength and resilience. What motivated the Ming Dynasty to undertake such a massive project?
The Ming Dynasty, they really expanded and strengthened the Great Wall, creating that imposing structure that has captivated the world's imagination ever since. It really symbolized their power and their determination to safeguard China from those invaders, particularly those nomadic groups from the north who had been like this recurring threat throughout history.
So they were rebuilding, they were innovating, they were projecting their strength. It sounds like the Ming Dynasty was really back on top. But, history has kind of taught us that even great empires, they can fall. Was the Ming Dynasty able to maintain its power and its influence, or did it eventually succumb to the forces of decline that had toppled so many dynasties before it?
The Ming Dynasty, despite those initial successes, eventually fell victim to a combination of factors that have really undermined so many powerful empires: internal corruption, economic decline, and mounting pressure from this new wave of nomadic invaders from the north, the Manchus.
The Manchus. This is where we get the final dynasty in Chinese history, right? The Qing Dynasty. The last emperors of China. It's incredible to think that we've reached the final chapter in this epic tale of dynasties that has spanned millennia. What were the Manchus like as rulers? Did they embrace Chinese culture, or did they try to impose their own traditions and their ways of life on the Chinese people?
The Manchus, unlike the Mongols, were they were more inclined to adopt those Chinese customs and traditions. They kept that Confucian bureaucracy. They learned the Chinese language. They even embraced Chinese clothing and hairstyles. However, they also implemented some of their own cultural practices, most notably the Q hairstyle, the shaved head with the long braid in the back. That became a real symbol of their rule, and it was actually mandatory for all men.
The Q hairstyle, yeah, I've seen that in historical dramas. It's a pretty striking look. It must have been a very powerful symbol of Manchu authority and this visible marker of their rule. But were the Manchus able to maintain the same level of power and prosperity as the previous dynasties? Did they achieve a period of like stability and growth, or were they constantly battling to just maintain control?
The early king emperors, they enjoyed considerable success. They expanded the empire's territory. They ushered in this period of relative peace and prosperity, and they encouraged cultural exchange between Manchu and Han Chinese traditions. One of the most celebrated king emperors was Kenshi, who reigned for an impressive 61 years. He's actually considered one of the greatest rulers in Chinese history. He was known for his intellectual curiosity, his patronage of the arts, and his efforts to really integrate Manchu and Han Chinese cultures.
So it was a multicultural empire, a period of flourishing culture, and a wise and capable emperor kind of at the helm. It sounds like the Qing dynasty was off to a very promising start. But history kind of suggests that these periods of peace and prosperity are often followed by challenges and upheavals. What were some of the major obstacles that the Qing dynasty faced? What internal or external forces kind of threatened their stability and ultimately led to their downfall?
You're right. The 19th century brought a series of challenges that would really shake the Qing dynasty to its core, and these challenges would, ultimately lead to its downfall and the end of the dynastic system that had shaped China for millennia.
It sounds like we're entering this pivotal period in Chinese history, this time of great change and upheaval. I can't wait to explore these challenges in more detail and to see how the Qing dynasty navigated, these turbulent times. It's amazing how history is filled with these patterns of rise and fall, of growth and decline. It's a reminder that even the most powerful empires are subject to those forces of change.
It's a reminder that power is never absolute, and that even the most enduring systems can be they can be swept away by the tides of history.
So we left off with the Qing dynasty, kind of facing this whole new set of challenges in the 19th century. It's almost as if the stage is set for, like a dramatic final act in this long history of Chinese dynasties. What were some of those pivotal challenges? What were the forces that really started to, chip away at the Qing dynasty's power?
Well, the 19th century, brought some pretty big shifts in the global landscape. You had these European powers, particularly Great Britain. They were very eager to, expand their trade with China. They saw it as this massive untapped market for all their manufactured goods. But the Qing dynasty, they were very wary of, that foreign influence, and they imposed all these strict regulations on trade with the outside world.
It's interesting how this clash of cultures and economic ambitions kind of played out on the world stage, right? The Qing dynasty was, so deeply rooted in tradition, really trying to maintain their established order. And then you have these Western powers, fueled by industrialization and global ambitions. It seems like this almost inevitable collision.
It was a collision that would have some really profound implications for China's future. The British, they were determined to find a product that the Chinese would buy in large quantities, and they turned to a pretty controversial commodity, opium. They cultivated opium in India and started smuggling it into China, and that, of course, created this massive demand and caused all these, widespread social and economic problems.
Opium. Yeah, this is where things get, kind of dark.
Yeah.
It wasn't just about like trade imbalances, right? It was about exploiting a weakness, creating this dependency. How did the Qing dynasty respond to this influx of opium? I mean, they must have recognized the damage that it was causing.
They did. The Qing Emperor, he was really alarmed by that devastating impact of, opium addiction. So he appointed Lin Zexu, who was a high-ranking official, to try to tackle this growing crisis. Zexu's actions were pretty decisive. He seized and destroyed huge quantities of opium, an act that really infuriated the British, who saw it as this, direct attack on their trade and their national pride.
I can imagine their reaction. millions of pounds of opium going up in smoke.
Yeah.
That's a pretty powerful statement. It's almost like an act of defiance against this encroaching Western power.
It was a bold move, but it had some pretty significant consequences. The British, they saw this as a threat to their interests and and a violation of what they perceived as their rights. So they responded with military force. In 1840, they sent a naval expedition to China, and that's how the First Opium War began.
The Opium Wars, they really do mark this major turning point in Chinese history, right? It wasn't just about opium, was it? It was about, the Qing dynasties, their struggle to maintain their sovereignty, their traditional way of life against this, expanding Western imperialism.
You're exactly right. The First Opium War, it was a humiliating defeat for the Qing dynasty. They were forced to sign a series of these unequal treaties that ceded Hong Kong to the British, opened up more Chinese ports to foreign trade, and even granted extraterritoriality to British citizens, meaning they were subject to British law, not Chinese law, while they were in China.
So their power was, kind of diminished. Their sovereignty was really undermined. And Western influence just started to seep into China.
Oh.
It seems like the walls were starting to close in. Was that the end of the conflict, with the West? Did the Qing dynasty ever regain any of its lost ground?
Unfortunately, no. And in 1856, this incident involving a British registered ship, the Arrow, it ignited the Second Opium War. And that second conflict further weakened the Qing dynasty and just resulted in even more concessions to Western powers. It was a period of, just immense internal and external turmoil for the Qing dynasty, and it was really only going to get tougher from there.
It's like the Qing dynasty was like caught in this vice, right? Facing this pressure from the West and struggling to maintain control internally. And then, if things weren't complicated enough, a new threat emerged from within. The Taiping Rebellion. What was the Taiping Rebellion all about? What were its root causes, and how did it further destabilize this already struggling Qing dynasty?
The Taiping Rebellion, which raged from 1850 to 1864, was one of the deadliest conflicts in human history. It was this massive civil war led by Han Xuquan, a very charismatic figure who claimed to be, get this, the younger brother of Jesus Christ. And he preached this unique blend of Christianity and Chinese folk religion. And, he attracted millions of followers who were really drawn to his message of radical social change.
The younger brother of Jesus, that's quite a claim. What was it about Han Xuquan's message that was so appealing? What drew so many people to his cause, especially during this period of upheaval and uncertainty?
Well, Han Xuquan, he promised a radical transformation of Chinese society. He called for the overthrow of the Qing dynasty, the abolition of private property, and the establishment of a more egalitarian society. He also promoted this very strict moral code that resonated with a lot of people who were just disillusioned with what they saw as the corruption and decline of the Qing dynasty.
So you have this religious fervor, a promise of this utopian society, and all against this backdrop of social and economic unrest. It's a potent mix. It can really mobilize people to action. How successful were the Taiping rebels? Did they pose a real threat to the Qing dynasty's power?
The Taiping Rebellion, they posed a really significant challenge to the Qing dynasty. They actually managed to establish their own capital in Nanjing, and they controlled a large part of territory in southern China. However, after years of really brutal fighting, the rebellion was finally crushed by the Qing forces with some help from Western powers. But the cost of that victory was immense. Millions of people died during that rebellion, and it added to the Qing dynasty's growing list of woes.
It's a really tragic period in Chinese history. Even though the Qing dynasty survived the Taiping Rebellion, it was a Pyrrhic victory. They emerged from that conflict deeply weakened and scarred.
Yeah.
It seems like they were just, facing challenges on all sides.
They were. The Qing dynasty, they were really clinging to power, but their legitimacy, their authority, it had just been, really severely eroded. The Opium Wars had exposed their vulnerability to these Western powers. The Taiping Rebellion showed that they couldn't really effectively govern or maintain order. And, and internal corruption and economic stagnation just further weakened their hold on power. The writing was on the wall.
It's as if we've reached the final act in this long-running drama of Chinese dynasties, right?
Yeah.
The Qing dynasties on the ropes, facing this combination of internal and external pressures that seem like almost insurmountable. What were those final blows? What brought about the end of the Qing dynasty and really, the end of imperial rule in China?
In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the Qing Dynasty, they faced this series of events that just really sealed their fate. You had the First Sino-Japanese War from 1894 to 1895, and that really showed their military weakness, compared to this rapidly modernizing Japan. And then the Boxer Rebellion from 1899 to 1901, which was this violent uprising against foreign influence that just further eroded their authority and led to foreign intervention. All these events just underscored the Qing dynasties, their inability to adapt to a changing world and to really effectively address the needs of their people.
So they were crumbling under the weight of their own internal problems and facing this increasing pressure from a rapidly changing world order. It seems like the stage was set for a pretty dramatic shift in power. What were the events that finally led to the fall of the Qing dynasty? How did this long era of imperial rule, how did it actually come to an end?
The final blow came in the form of, revolution. By the early 20th century, this new generation of reformers and revolutionaries had emerged. They were inspired by, Western ideas of democracy and nationalism, and they were determined to create this new modern China. One of the most prominent figures in this movement was Sun Yat-sen. He was a doctor. He'd studied abroad, and he was really influenced by Western political thought.
Sun Yat-sen, he's often called, the father of modern China, this visionary leader who helped guide China, into this new era. What role did he play in the fall of the Qing dynasty? How did he manage to actually topple this centuries-old imperial system?
Well, Sun Yat-sen, his followers, they really advocated for the overthrow of the Qing dynasty and the establishment of a republic. They believed that that dynastic system with its inherent corruption and inefficiency, it was no longer capable of effectively governing China. They really wanted to create this new system of government that was more responsive to the needs of the people and that could really guide China into the modern world.
It sounds like this really pivotal moment in Chinese history. This clash between the old and the new, between tradition and progress. How did this clash actually play out? Did the Qing dynasty surrender peacefully, or was there this violent struggle for power?
Well, in 1911, these series of uprisings, known as the Xinhai Revolution, erupted across China, and these uprisings were led by Sun Yat-sen's followers and these other revolutionary groups who shared his vision for a new China. And the Qing dynasty, already weakened and facing all this widespread discontent, they couldn't. They just couldn't stop these rebellions. So in 1912, they were forced to abdicate, finally bringing an end to over 2,000 years of imperial rule in China.
It's incredible to think about the magnitude of that change, the end of an era, the fall of an empire that had endured for millennia. What happened next? I mean, was this transition to a republic a smooth one, or did China face these new challenges and uncertainties in this new post-imperial world?
The transition was, it was anything but smooth. The early years of the Republic of China were marked by political instability, regionalism, and the rise of these warlords who controlled vast territories. The fall of the Qing dynasty created this power vacuum that all these different factions were just rushing to fill. It was a period of real turmoil and uncertainty as China struggled to create this new form of government and navigate this rapidly changing world.
So it seems like some old patterns persisted.
Yeah.
Right. Even with the end of that dynastic system, that struggle for power and control, it continued. It's like China entered this new phase of its ongoing cycle of unity and fragmentation, searching for that new equilibrium in this post-imperial world.
That's a great way to put it. The fall of the Qing dynasty, it didn't really erase those, those deep-seated challenges that China had faced for centuries. It ushered in this new era where those challenges would play out on a different stage with new actors. The search for unity, for stability, and for a place in this, rapidly changing world that would continue.
Wow. What an incredible, journey through history we've taken. We've explored thousands of years of Chinese history,
Yeah.
witnessed the rise and fall of all these dynasties, the enduring power of ideas, and this constant struggle for power and unity. It's a story filled with ambition and innovation, tragedy and resilience, and I think that's what really makes it so captivating. Right?
And we've only just scratched the surface. Chinese history, it's this vast and complex tapestry. It's woven from countless individual stories and cultural achievements and political struggles. It's a story that continues to unfold even today.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of Chinese dynasties, I have one final question for you. What really stood out to you from this exploration? What moments or figures resonated with you? What insights did you gain into the patterns of history, the nature of power, and just that resilience of the human spirit? Take some time to reflect on those questions and to keep exploring this rich and just endlessly fascinating history of China.
There's always more to learn, and the journey of discovery is never really over.